Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the City Connect podcast with me, your host, Prince Carl. Very, very happy to be here. It is now April. We've gotten past the Ides of March. Quick little explanation on the title of this podcast, Beware the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March is a quote from a Shakespearean play. The title of the Shakespearean play is Julius Caesar. In the play, Julius Caesar, the main character, ultimately is assassinated on March 15th, aka the Ides of March. So the Ides of March is basically the middle of March. And throughout the play, they're always telling Julius Caesar, beware the Ides of March. So I felt that was an appropriate title for this podcast in light of some of the recent media events. March 2020 is certainly a March that will go down in history. In some senses, forever changing the world. Certainly affecting a lot of things. Unfortunately, a lot of people have passed away and become stricken with the well-known coronavirus, aka COVID-19. So in this podcast, I'm going to talk about that. I mean, there's no way you could possibly have a podcast and not talk about the coronavirus. I mean, give me a break. It's like, what am I living in some sort of alternate reality? Originally, I was hoping early March, I was just kind of like, oh man, this isn't looking good. And, kind of in denial about it. But as things started to progress, I realized the seriousness of it. I've also been very inspired by how much people have pulled together and how much progress has been made and how we have averted what could have been a very disastrous crisis. Everybody's pulled together, and all of the essential workers, myself included, have done their jobs very well. So there is a lot of silver linings. So I don't want to downplay the efforts of anyone or certainly the seriousness of the event. I just want to give an update of where news is now. And there is some positive news and there is some silver linings. So I'm going to discuss that. Interestingly, I believe myself, 85 to 90% sure that I contracted the coronavirus, aka COVID-19. So I'll discuss sort of the timeline of that, the symptoms that I experienced. I'm back to normal. I have a little bit of nasal congestion. In short, the story on that is that it was basically a very mild version of the flu. It wasn't anything that ever debilitated me, but it just was it just lingered for very, very, very long, longer than any flu I've ever had. And so I'll talk about that and how I responded to that. Then, like I said, I'll give an update on the news, kind of where we're at, some positive news. I'm also going to talk about kind of the future of where I'm going as far as my career goes, and give some explanation to the roots of leadership. Talk about the why, the why of what I do, and then just kind of go from there. So, first of all, I want to say thanks again for listening. Interestingly, I thought that, the viewership of the podcast would just kind of trickle down a little bit, because I haven't put out a podcast. The last podcast I put out was March 3rd, 2020. It is now April 11th, 2020. So it's been it's been more than a month since I put a podcast out. And interestingly, excuse me, the listenership has increased, and it's weird. Obviously I think people have a lot more free time on their hands, being that everyone is self-quarantining. I myself had self-quarantine for about 2 weeks. And it's kind of cool in a way, because I think that one thing that is great about it is that the quarantining has forced people to reprioritize what's really important in their lives, and giving people a chance to spend time with their family, giving people a chance to take a break, relax, not be a slave to the rat race, traffic, and I think in some senses when the world does get back online and come back to normal this summer, I think that I have no doubt I myself am going to fondly look back on the days of quarantine and think, wow, those were chaotic times, those were sad times, those were hard times, but there's definitely a lot of positive things that come out of it. So basically, I'll get right into it as far as what happened with me. I think the first symptom I ever had, and I have a timeline on this. I was if I got the coronavirus. Again, I've never been tested. I've never done the antibody test. Eventually, I will do the antibody test. But I was most likely exposed to this virus late February, and then March 2nd, I had the first symptom, and it was like a mild fever. And I remember I was doing a delivery at work, and I was in the truck, and I got back in the truck, and I was like feeling like I was a little bit cold, or my temperature felt a little weird. I was like, maybe it's just cold outside. I was like, this can't be like a flu coming on, or like a virus, or a fever. And then I was like, nah, this is a fever. But it was like so mild. It was barely noticeable. And so I was kind of in denial about it for 3 or 4 days. I kept working, didn't need to sleep in anymore. Just I'll take some more vitamin C, and this thing will go away, and no big deal. And so then the last few days of that week, maybe like March 8th or 9th or 10th, I decided to take like 4 or 5 days off of work and just try to knock it out. Eventually, about 2 weeks into it, it turned into like a bronchitis cough. So it was like a dry cough, and there was a kind of a productive cough, and that lasted for another 2 weeks of just coughing. My wife got a very small version of it, a much more mild case than I did. She never had a fever, but she had kind of a cough and congestion. And the other guy I was working with, the truck driver I was working with, we were in the same truck for about 10 days, and he ended up getting something, but it was a much more mild case. So the cough went on for like 2 weeks. Then after 2 weeks, so now we're into like the mid-March, then I was home for 2 weeks, and then it kind of turned into like a nasal thing. I lost my sense of smell. So initially I was like, I just got some form of the flu, because this was way back when, the coronavirus wasn't that big of a deal, like end of February, beginning of March. But as time moved on, I was like, well, this flu has lasted a very long duration. Usually they don't last that long, even though it was very mild, and it didn't really put me in bed or anything like that. I mean, I was able to work and do whatever I needed to do. It was more of an annoyance, but it lasted a very long duration. I lost my sense of smell, which according to a study, about 35% of people who had coronavirus lost that. So I lost my sense of smell for 10 days. I had a cough, and I had a very mild fever. So I would be surprised at this point if I did not get it. The good news is that I have no symptoms now. A mild sort of congestion, but a lot of that is because of allergies. I notice when I go outside, I kind of get more, and I've always been someone that gets mild allergies in the springtime anyway. So one thing they were talking about doing is an antibody test, which is a super easy test. From what it looked like from a video that I saw, it looked almost like an EPT test, like a pregnancy test. It's like the stick, and you sort of like get a drop of blood from your finger, and then it tests for the specific antibodies for coronavirus, and basically lets you know if you had been exposed to the virus, and if so, if you have the antibodies, so that basically you are sort of in the clear. You won't get the virus again, nor will you be able to transmit it to others. And then, the whole idea is, let's say hypothetically I take this test, I'm very certain that I probably did get over coronavirus, and I took it, and now it says, okay, you have the antibodies for coronavirus. Cool. That's a positive thing. Number one, I would be able to donate my plasma for up to 3 patients, and give the plasma of mine, which contains the antibodies for coronavirus, to someone who was immunocompromised or not able to produce their own antibodies, and sort of give them, it'd be a direct serum transfer. And they actually used that successfully during the days of the 1918 Spanish flu, being that there is no vaccine or specific medication to stop the virus. That's kind of cool. So I would definitely donate plasma or my blood if that was the case. But then the question comes up of, if people are immune and have the antibodies to the coronavirus because they've been exposed to the coronavirus and thereby defeated it, should I walk around with some sort of a badge of honor, or like, a pin that says, hey, I have the antibodies for coronavirus, I can't get it, nor can I give it to you. So that kind of puts me in like an elitist class, and I'm, say, for example, able to go back to work and make money and go out in society and do whatever I want because I'm in the clear. Whereas someone who, say, for example, decided to self-quarantine for the last 2 months and was never exposed to coronavirus, and they could potentially be a carrier. So it is, knowing that someone experienced coronavirus, has antibodies and got past it, it certainly puts you in a more secure place than someone that was never exposed to coronavirus. But the person that was never exposed to coronavirus was never exposed to it because they followed the protocol and they did what they were, obligated to do. So I don't think wearing badges or bragging about it is ethical. I think it's good to know for me, myself, and my family. I probably would tell people. But as far as like having some tiered system where, people are identifying themselves and doing that, I think that's sort of like, that's like classifying people like the Nazis did, where they put different badges on them, and I don't think that's a good idea. But again, that's a good thing because, you look at the numbers, and currently there's more than 500,000 reported cases in the United States. And I believe the death toll is about 21,000. And then it's weird because it says like recovered cases is like 49,000. So that doesn't really make sense, because if you've got 500,000 cases and 21,000 people died, why would there only be 50,000 recovered cases? So I think that the recovered cases is a little bit more vague. They haven't necessarily done that, but with the antibody tests, they'll be able to know. People who got exposed to it and defeated it without ever knowing that they had been exposed to it will know. People that did feel like they probably got it, like me, will know. And it'll be, I think overall a lot of society is going to have a lot of confidence in getting back to norm. I don't think people are going to just jump back into life as it was before the coronavirus. There's going to be a lot of slow rollouts. For example, we went to Walmart yesterday, and you had to like line up around the building to get into Walmart, and then every single person had to be checked that they were wearing a mask, and you had to wear a mask the entire time that you were in the store. And it was kind of interesting. Like, I've never actually seen that. I mean, it used to, like, wearing a mask used to be this thing that, like, a lot of times in Asian cultures they would do it, and once in a while you'd see someone wearing a mask, but it's like, it was just something that no one ever did. And now it's like you go to Walmart and every single person in the store is wearing it. It's kind of turned into the norm. So there's going to be a lot more of that. There's going to be way more attention towards hand washing, disinfection, and also social distancing. So I think like people will slowly, they'll say, okay, we can start to go back to work. We can start to go back to school. We can start to, open up the casinos and stuff like that. But we still need to have these precautions in place and be conscious of it. The other thing they're going to be looking for is a resurgence of the virus in fall, because that's what happened with the Spanish flu, where the warm weather kind of takes the virus out of the air, because it's harder for a virus to spread in warm weather than it is in cold weather. And so the warm weather of the summer kind of quelled the virus for a while, but then it came back in the fall. So maybe we'll go back to self-quarantining again for the fall months. I don't know. I hope not. But at some point we need to get going with our economy. We can't just have the whole world shut down, frozen in place forever. I'm a very lucky person in this whole thing because I'm considered an essential worker. Being that I'm a truck driver, I had the interesting experience to drive a load. We drove a load of medical machines. They're called Pyxis machines, which are basically, it's a medication cabinet, and it's like a computerized medication cabinet, and you type in the patient's name and the meds pop out. And we drove a load of those from San Diego to Chicago to the McCormick Convention Center, and it was interesting because they basically took over the entire convention center. They had a whole flurry of guys, electricians, drywall guys, journeymen, and other construction guys just working at a flurried pace, building this entire hospital inside. And I don't know how long it took, but when we got there, it seemed like it was nearing completion. I think it was about a 1,000-bed facility. But it's cool, and it's inspiring to see when everybody gets on the same page, to see stuff like that happen. So the good news is that hospital, that pop-up hospital that I was able to drive medical machines to, it may never be used, which is a good thing. And it seems that, and I'm not 100% on this, but it seems that the Mercy ship, or the USS Comfort, the one that's in LA, is not being fully used. And as of today's date, April 11th, hospitals in Southern California are not at full capacity. In fact, the governor of California actually returned ventilators and put them back into use for the United States. So that's good. So now we'll get into some of the good news. There's a lot of talk about this whole surge of cases that was expected to come, where people that didn't know that they had it, all of a sudden they're going to start to get it, and it's going to exponentially just blow up. On Friday the 27th of March, Dr. Jahan Fahimi tweeted that, quote, "It hit me today. We are in a flattened curve. While the surge is still coming, we have time. Each day we are more prepared." Dr. Robert Watcher, chairman of the University of California, San Francisco, tweeted on the 29th of March that, quote, "It seems like we're uber prepared for a surge that may not be coming, which will be great." And that was end of March, and now we're into the first, 3rd of April. And it seems that, Washington State has returned ventilators. California has returned ventilators. Both Washington State and California are not at full capacity with their hospitals, which is good. The CDC, Robert Redfield from the CDC on April 9th stated, this is coming from NPR's Up First podcast. The CDC, Robert Redfield, stated that we are nearing the peak of the curve, and it is expected to go down. So it's no longer shooting straight up, it's kind of flattening. And after it flattens, they're expecting it to aggressively decrease cases in the coming weeks. And that has everything to do with not only the healthcare workers' hard work, but also the fact that everybody has been on the same page in social distancing. And it's interesting. People definitely are social distancing, and they're doing their part to quell the spread of the disease, which uncontrolled, there's all those models that show what would have or could have happened if it was completely uncontrolled. And, you've got a situation where a third of the U.S. has the disease, and maybe 10% of that 120 million people that have it need to be hospitalized. But 10% of 120 million is 10 million people, and there's just simply not enough beds for 10 million people in the U.S., which means that people would essentially be dying just everywhere without any form of medical care. So that model contrasted with what actually happened based on the diligent efforts of state and local communities and social distancing has proven to have a positive result, and it's actually not going as bad as they had originally predicted. And NPR Up First stated on April 6th that in New York, there are lower hospitalization and death rates. In New York, it seems that new cases have plateaued. Italy and Spain appear to be doing better after their social distancing efforts. Washington State is sending back 400 ventilators, as is California. So I want to put this in perspective, but I don't want to trivialize the seriousness of this. But in the United States, on an average year, 50,000 people die of the flu. And the current coronavirus cases, death toll is 21,000. Now, granted, that would have been a lot more than 21,000 had we not done anything, because it is a very contagious disease. It spreads very effectively. It's got an R factor of 3. So it's good that we did everything we could, but nonetheless, on any given year, 50,000 people are going to die of the flu. Not only that, but every day on average in the United States, 7,452 people will die. Every day. 7,400 people on average are going to die in the U.S. And on average, about 2.8 to 2.9 million people per year will die. The coronavirus, unfortunately, has accelerated some people who had existing health problems and health conditions to die. But I want to emphasize that I think some of the hyperbole of, completely healthy young people can and will die of the coronavirus. It is possible, but not probable. Statistically speaking, the most likely scenario for a young healthy person to die would be in an auto accident. There was a study done in New York of people ages 20 to 40 who contracted the coronavirus, were hospitalized, and died. Of those people ages 20 to 40 who died from the coronavirus, 95% of which had a pre-existing health condition, a serious health condition. So asthma, COPD, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, or an autoimmune disease. So that being said, yeah, there is a possibility you could be young, healthy, and die of it. Absolutely. But I want to emphasize, and I'm very inspired by the fact that the media now is starting to report some positive news. Because at the beginning of this, when it was all speculation and what could happen and what may happen and what possibly could happen, I mean, the news cycle on March 15th, the Ides of March, was absolutely astronomically wild. I mean, it was just all over the place crazy. And it seemed that every day that went by, the craziness and the chaos factor of it would ratchet up higher and higher and higher. And, if you could go back to what the media was saying back then versus what they're saying now, I'm hoping that we're definitely starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and things will progress and move forward. And again, I was very honored to be able to be a part of the relief effort for Chicago. Hopefully they never need that hospital that they built, but to deliver some medical machines was kind of cool. And being considered an essential worker was also a good feeling. I'm very, very lucky because there's a significant amount of people that are completely out of work. Over 16.5 million, I think it's more than that now, are simply out of work. And that's a serious problem economically. The 2008 financial crisis saw a total of 3.4 to 4 million people at its peak unemployed, whereas currently, as of last week, I think we're at close to 17 million people out of work. Now we're hoping that that's going to be like a quick rebound, come May 1st, May 15th, June 1st, come summertime. The restaurants start to open up, and people will get their jobs at the restaurant back and start working in hotels again and start traveling again, and the airline industry open. And basically, when everything starts to open back up, people will start to get their jobs back, and hopefully those unemployment numbers go down. And if you look at and follow the Wall Street, the Dow Jones actually rebounded from, I think the high before this whole crisis back in February was around 30,000. It dipped to below 20,000, 19,000 something. It's now back up to about 24,000 and climbing. So the Dow is and Wall Street is definitely convinced that we're going to get back online. People are going to get their jobs back, and we're not going to have a long-term severe recession. I think we probably will have some form of an economic slowdown, no doubt, and a recession. And I want to say one silver lining to that is that, if you're in the position to change jobs, or maybe thought about changing jobs, this would be a good time. I've made some changes to my career into specific. I'm still a truck driver, but specifically to what I'm going to be hauling. And I remember that there was a time when I was thinking to myself, well, I'm making a better income now and times are better. And I wish I could go back to 2008 and take advantage of some of those, really great real estate deals, or, get into the stock market when the bottom was as low as it was back in 2008. Now is kind of one of those opportunities where you will have a chance to buy a car cheaper if you're looking to do that. If you're looking to buy real estate, if you're looking to invest, it's definitely going to be a time to do it, because as the economy slowly pulls out of this 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, I think you'll look back and think, wow, that was a great time to buy whatever it is that I bought. So that's good. Definitely a silver lining. A few little corrections on my last podcast, episode number 5. I think I said that when I was working at Swift, I was making $800 a month. I want to correct that. It was average about $750 to $800 per week. So apologies for that. And then I think I said something along the lines of, what is my why as far as being an entrepreneur, as far as business goes. And I think I said something along the lines of, my why is just to return to the level of comfort and lifestyle that we had back in the 1990s. And that kind of is, but that sounds a little lazy. I want to be able to look back on my life. I want to live a long, healthy, productive life and be able to retire well and be wealthy when I'm retired, and look back and say I've created something of value, something to pass on to my kids, and I've lived a life worth living and a life worth talking about. Excuse me. Jeff Bezos always talks about that. He said something like he always envisions himself as a 90-year-old man, and when he's a 90-year-old man, he wants to be able to look back on his life and think that he did everything that he possibly could to be as successful as he could. And so far, it's going pretty well for Jeff Bezos. But roots of leadership. I want to say that my dad, my grandfather, even my uncles, we're a family of leaders. And my dad, my dad was always, he was a federal prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was involved in management for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Every church that we went to, he was always the president of the congregation. What else? My neighbors just got back. My grandfather started Frankenmuth Mutual Insurance Company. They never took it public. It was an insurance company they started through the church in Frankenmuth, Michigan. Had they taken that company public, it would have been a multi-billion-dollar company, and we would have all been billionaires. But he started that company. He was one of the founders of that company, and then he was just sort of a leader who led by charisma. He was very much like a Santa Claus. He was a grandfather to many kids who didn't really have a grandfather. And he just always had a smile and a warm-hearted heart. But he was able to kind of look at things from a leadership standpoint, and make critical decisions. But at the same time, being extremely likable, and always had a joke to tell, always had a story to tell, always had time to talk to people. So he was definitely more of a charismatic leader. My dad's more of kind of like a top-down leader, not as much charisma or likability, but certainly thinks of along the lines of someone, who's in charge of a group of people. My uncles are leaders. One of my uncles is a former CFO of Best Incorporated, and he's a consultant. Another uncle's a doctor. A couple airline pilots. So it's just kind of like I've always seen myself as wanting to start a company. I've definitely worked at a lot of companies and learned a lot, and my intention is to take the skill set that I have, and the thing is, when I'm at a company, I'm always studying the company, and I'm looking at how they operate, how they do what they do, why they do what they do, areas that could be improved. I don't necessarily tell the business leaders you need to improve this, you need to improve that. I don't see any point in doing that, but I can tell right off the bat coming into a new company, because every company is like a new culture. It's like a new world in the way that they interact and the way that they do business, and you can tell right off the bat coming into it what the problems are, or you can usually see these are the 5 or 10 problems, and how I would run it differently. But ultimately, unless it's my company and I'm in charge of it, I don't really have any say in how things work. So I guess, as I move forward in creating a logistics company, I intend to use the experiences that I've had at working at so many different companies, and the negative experiences and the mistakes that I've seen most likely, and also the things that I feel have been successful, and use those to create the best company that I possibly can. But at the same time, it's interesting because I'm not in the luxury position where I have a trust fund, or I have, a $10 million check or something where I can just start hiring people and start something up. I need to be paid every week, every day, and every step of the way. But at the same time that I'm working, I also need to focus on building a company. And the next endeavor I'm doing with trucking is going to afford me that possibility to sort of grow. And that's just about all I have to say. If you could share this podcast, again, I would very much appreciate it. I'm again flattered and surprised by the numbers of it, because I check the numbers very regularly, and it's interesting to me that I could put out a podcast a month and people are still very interested in it, and also the every episode I seem to put out gets a bigger viewership base. So again, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you want to contact me on Instagram, my Instagram is @_Prince, PRINCE, _Carl, CARL.